All right, Rabbi, say good morning. I'm sorry for the bit of the delayed start. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Av, Max and Brenda Lapkovsky, in honor of Yitzhak Meir's upcoming Bar Mitzva, Dr. Riva Mitzner in commemoration of the first yartzheit of her father, Dr. Larry Schneck, Aryeh ben Chaim, Jack Bennett in honor of Sargent עומר TALMUD, who was killed by a Hamas Anti-Tank Missile on the Gaza border on May 12, 2021. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, the Plunka Family, in commemoration of the yartzheit of the Steipler Gaon, incredible, Neshama Shtaf and Aliyah, Hillel Dina Soclof in memory of Hillel's brother Shmaryo ben Avraham Abba, Ira Miriam Grossman in honor of the 100th birthday of Miriam's mother, Violet Howard, Mazel Tov, Paul and Kathy Pollack, actually a very beautiful belated Hakaros Hatov, for the riveting and inspiring Divar Torah that Rabbi Silber's my son Avram shared in their shul in Ahavas Sholom in Columbus, Ohio, while he was there for seed this past summer. And Yehudim Bracha Buchwalter wishing a Mazel Tov to Moshe Bernstein HaKohen on his first birthday. Beautiful. What an array of sponsorships to begin the week. So also with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Chaf Vav 26. We are picking up in Mirz Hashem on Chaf Hey Amud Beis. A lot to do today and a lot of really fascinating Gemara and some incredible sugyas ahead of us. So we left off Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda Omer Rav. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, about 14 lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda Omer Rav. Chasan v'hashoshvinin v'chol b'nei achopa peturim min Succah. So Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda says in the name of Rav that a chasan, right, a groom, shoshvinin. Shoshvinin are his attendants. Those are the individuals who are part of the immediate wedding party. So all of those individuals are pater from Succah. Again, we'll discuss why exactly that is. So the Gemara says, Kol Shiva, all 7 days. 7 days, of course, a reference to Sheva Brachas. So Chasan, all of his attendants, pater from Kriyat Shema, all 7 days. My time, and what's the reason? Mishum deba'u lemitri, because they have to celebrate. Because they have to celebrate, and the assumption is that the celebration can't really take place in the Sukkah. It says the Gemara, V'lech le'b'sukkah v'leitchu b'sukkah. I don't know, why not? Why can't they go ahead and eat in the Sukkah and celebrate in the Sukkah? Ein simcha ella b'chuppah. Because the Gemara says true simcha can only be experienced in the chuppah. Now this is interesting, because if you look at Tosis Divrei HaMaschil, Ein simcha ella b'chuppah, you see that Tosis? So if you look at the last 5 lines of that Tosis, the middle of that 5th to last line, Tosis writes, V'tzarech l'dakdek, mahi chuppah. What does that mean when the Gemara says, Ein simcha ella b'chuppah? That simcha could only be experienced in chuppah. When we think about chuppah, so we think about, again, that little canopy that's in the wedding hall, right? What is the Gemara referring to? So this is incredible. Di b'makom sheberechu tchila, birchas nisuin, kari lechuppah, because if you think that it's talking about the actual bridal canopy under which the chassan and kala get married, sometimes that canopy is outdoors. In fact, there is a concept like this in halacha of dafka getting married under the stars, right? Dafka getting married outside, or underneath the sky, I should say, not dafka under the stars, underneath the sky. So what's the chuppah? So the Gemara says, last 2 lines of Tosas, Elamakom ikar yeshivas chasan v'kala, the kari lechuppah. Rather, the chuppah refers to the primary marital residence. V'lo makom ma'asei la'akrai ba'alma. But listen to this. The custom is Mana Gemara, which I think it's kedai to revive this, which is, where would they make the chasana? They would have a house for the chasan and kala. Let's say, think about this. Instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars on a party, so you take that money, you put a down payment on a house, right? You make the chasana there. Who's invited to the wedding? Whoever can fit in the house. That's about it, right? That's the guest list. And that was called the chuppah. Thank you so much. That's where the wedding festivities would take place, in that home. And that, of course, would become, so that's the primary location for the actual wedding itself, for the Sheva Brachas, and that's the Makom Simcha of the Chasan and Kala. He said, V'sham mevarchin berchas chasanim kol shiva. And that home is actually where they would have Sheva Brachas. So everything about from the actual wedding itself through Sheva Brachas would all take place inside that home. So now the Gemara makes a little bit more sense. When we say that a chasan and all of his attendants, who are the people who are the wedding party, are exempt from Sukkah, that's because the primary simcha, right, the celebration of a wedding, took place in the chuppah being the marital home. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. So why not just go ahead and eat in the sukkah and celebrate in the chuppah? In other words, you could split it up. Do your eating in the sukkah, because after all it's sukkahs, right? And go ahead and do your celebrating in the marital home, and Shalom Yisrael. Ein simcha ela b'makom suda. No, because the simcha of Sheva Brachas is what? Is rooted in Suda, is rooted in the meal. So you can't go ahead and divide up the meal from the Simcha. So why not go ahead and just make the marital home the Sukkah? In other words, if a Chasan and Kala is getting married right before Sukkot, go ahead and make the chuppah in the Sukkah, like quite literally. Let the marital home be the Sukkah. Abai Amr Mishum Yichud. Abai says because there might be a problem of Yichud. Now this is actually very interesting. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here Mishum Yichud. It's about 6 lines from the bottom of Rashi. This tam sukkah hayu osin begago sehen ve'in derech bia v'yitzia shel rabin. But let's say people most often, it's interesting. Where did you make your sukkah? Bismana Gemara, on your roof. Right? Remember again, roofs were flat. So you'd make your sukkah on your roof, which means that your sukkah was not open to the public, right? People lavdaf were just stopping by, because in order to access your sukkah, you had to first go through your home. So you could run into a potential issue of yichud. Yichud, remember again, refers to the prohibition of a man to be alone with a woman. So let's say the chassan leaves the sukkah for whatever reason and someone else is there, right? People aren't regularly coming and going. You could run into a problem of yichud. Rava Amr Mishum Tsar Chassan. Rava said the reason that we don't go ahead and have the chuppah ultimately again is because of the tsar that it'll cause to the chassan. What does it mean, the tsar to the chassan? So Rashi points out over here that the sukkah doesn't exactly lend itself to an atmosphere of intimacy. So the newlywed couple is going to have issues of intimacy if their marital home ultimately again is the sukkah. Interesting. So my ben Abbas, what's the practical difference between these two reasons? The nafkamina would be if you have a sukkah situated in a more public space. According to the Mandamar who says that you can't have the chuppah in the sukkah because of yichud. If people are regularly coming and going, there's no problem of yichud. But according to the opinion who says that it won't allow for intimacy, ultimately, again, Ika, then that reason will still apply. We'll say this intimacy piece is an actually interesting idea because this actually comes up contemporarily as well, which is there is a mitzvah to sleep in the sukkah. So interestingly enough, one of the, even though there's a mitzvah, we'll talk about this, a primary to sleep in the sukkah, there's no question that over time, the practice of sleeping in the sukkah has become less and less popular. So the shaila is why. Like we do everything else in the sukkah. So it's interesting. So part of it has to do with the fact that outside of Eretz Yisrael, sukkahs could already be cold. You could be patra al mitztayer. But the Aruch HaShulchan and others actually have something very interesting. They say that the whole essence of sukkah is teishu ke'in taduri. So it's to live in your sukkah like you live in your house. So when I live in my house, a person lives in his house, he sleeps in the same room with his wife. Hopefully, right? That's the goal, right? A person sleeps in the same room with his wife. So this is bepashtos. There aren't many women, no matter how much they love their husband, that are coming out to sleep in the sukkah. So some of the poskim interestingly write that a man is not obligated to sleep without his wife in order to sleep in the sukkah. Again, it's a machlokas poskim. Some say they are, but it's just interesting. I'm just pointing out over here that was brought up, and that's not even like a din in intimacy. It's a din just in kind of normal everyday behaviors. The sukkah is supposed to reflect my normal everyday life. So if a person's everyday life is he's a married man, he sleeps in the same room as his wife, sukkah doesn't afford that opportunity. Perhaps perhaps there's some license then not to sleep in the sukkah. So again, we'll get to that sugya, I'm just pointing it out over here. So Rabbi Silber said, Ano achli b'sukkah v'chadi b'chuppah. Listen to this. Rabbi Silber said, when I got married, I ate my meals in the sukkah, and we had the celebration in the chuppah. I will say, this is so beautiful. The kol shekim dechadi liboy, and Rabbi Zera said, I was so happy, the ka'avidna tarti, because I had the opportunity to perform both mitzvahs. I had the opportunity to perform the mitzvah of sukkah, and I had the opportunity to go ahead and also have Sheva brachas. So we'll say, what is the halacha in this circumstance? What is the obligation of chasan? So interestingly enough, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Reish Mem Sif Vav says as follows: Chasan v'shoshvina v'chol b'nei chuppah. A chasan, his wedding party, everybody's primary part of the chuppah. Piturin min hasukah kol zayin yimei mishta is exempt from sukkah. All of Sheva brachas. All of Sheva brachas. So the Mishnah Berurah comments on this a little bit. He says, De'ein simcha ela b'chuppah. The chuppah nikra makam hamuchan liyeshivas chasan v'kala. Then yichon lecha b'sukkah v'lismach b'chuppah. Then simcha ela b'makam suda u'mayish nasa erev. So again, Mishnah Berurah quotes it. Why? Because in simcha ela b'chuppah, and the chuppah is considered to be the primary residence of the chasan and kala. Now, the question, we're not going to get into it today, but the question, of course, becomes that halacha l'maisa, what do you do about this today, given the fact that we don't have the same setup? Right? We don't have this type of chuppah that the Gemara is referring to over here, where they get married in one place, all of the Sheva brachas. In fact, again, I think it's rare that Sheva brachas are made in the apartment of the Chasan and Kala. Right? So nothing really happens in the marital domicile. So this leads the Mishnah Berurah to say as follows: V'yesh mechayven oso. Some say the Chasan is obligated in Sukkah. Desrile de efshar le'achol b'Sukkah v'lismoach b'chuppah. Al kin eskimu achronim. Deroi lechasan lahachnir al atzmo v'leishev basukah v'lo levarich. Listen to this. This is incredible. So the Mishnah Berurah says, therefore, I think that the best approach is a chasan should be in the sukkah even during his Sheva brachas. Should be in the sukkah during his Sheva brachas. Right? Why? Because he could go ahead and have simcha in the chuppah and go ahead and have his meals in the sukkah. But ultimately, again, Mishnah Berurah says he shouldn't make a bracha. This is incredible. So Chasan should come to the sukkah, but he shouldn't make a bracha. And I both say, again, in those circumstances, Chasan wouldn't sleep in the sukkah, but ultimately, again, Chasan should be eating in the sukkah like the Psak of the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, interesting sugya. Again, more to all of these sugyas than what we're covering, but at least it gives you a little bit of a flavor. Tan Rabbanan, last two lines. Chasan v'ashal shin v'chol b'nei chol b'trom min hatfila. Listen to this. We'll say, now that we started talking about Chasan, let's go right there with the Chasan. Chasan and all of his attendants and all the people part of the chuppah, peturim min hatfila, are exempt from Shmona Esrei, minat tefillin, from tefillin, v'chayavim b'kriyas Shema, and they're obligated in Shema. They both say, now listen to this. Why are they parted from tefillah? So Rashi says over here, because tefillah requires kavanah, and the assumption, like we saw in yesterday's daf, that the chasan's mind is preoccupied. Tefillin, why is the chasan and all of his attendants parted from tefillin? Because by the wedding party, people drink a lot, and again, you're not supposed to wear tefillin while under the influence. So again, they're all pater from Shmona Esrei, because at the end of the day, Shmona Esrei requires kavanah, and they're involved in celebration, not allowed to wear tefillin or pater from tefillin because of shichros, drunkenness. However, they're chayiv in Shema. Now, why are they chayiv in Shema? Rashi points out over here, because really the only part of Shema that absolutely requires kavanah is the first line. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So the assumption is that for that one line, they could muster up requisite kavanah even in the midst of celebration. Top of Chaf Vav, Mishum Rabbi Shila Amru, in the name of Rabbi Shila, they said, Chasan Pater v'hashoshvinan v'chol b'nei achopa chayavin. Rabbi Shila disagrees. He holds that a Chasan is Pater even from the first pasuk of Kriyas Shema. Everyone else is going to be chayiv in Shema, like we said before, but the Chasan is Pater from Shema because we assume that the Chasan is preoccupied, and therefore, again, can't muster up the requisite kavanah even for the first line. Tanya, Rabbi Chanina, both say, just so you should know, contemporarily, the way we kind of look at a lot of these things, like the Mishnah Berurah says, It's actually a very sad statement. It's a pretty sad statement, but the Mishnah Berurah says, today, no one has kavanah anyway. So because no one has kavanah anyway, just daven. Just daven. So again, it's a sad statement, but halacha l'maisa, a lot of these exemptions that we're talking about don't really apply contemporarily. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara goes weiter. Tanya Amrabi Chananya ben Akavya. Kos ve'svarim tefillin umezuzos. Those who write Sifrei Torah. Or again, Svarim, that doesn't just have to mean Sifrei Torah. Svarim could also mean, remember, all of their books were written in scroll form. So you wanted a chumashim, right? You wanted a chumash bereshis. It was in a scroll form. So whoever's writing those scrolls, write svarim, tefillin, mezuzos, hein, v'sagrehen, sagrehen. So them, the people, so the sofrim, the merchants, the people who sell it, the kol ha'oskim b'malacha shamayim, and anyone who is involved in the supply of religious articles, la'asuye mochrei tcheles, to include those who go ahead and sell tcheles, pitur mikriyas shema. Ultimately, again, they are all pater from Shema, u'minat tefillah, shmona esrei, minat tefillin, u'mikol mitzvahs ha'amuros b'Torah, and from every other mitzvah as well. L'kayim div Rabbi Yosef Lili, Rabbi Yosef Lili, Omer, ha'osik b'mitzvah, pater min ha'mitzvah. This reflects Rabbi Yosef Lili, who says that one who is engaged in a mitzvah is what? Is what? Pater mitzvah. Now, what is the dramatic, overwhelming, life-altering chiddush in this? This is very different. Are these individuals osek b'mitzvah? No. What are they doing? Right? They're facilitating. They're facilitators of other people's mitzvahs, right? We'll say, again, remember, is there a mitzvah to try to say for Torah? Sure, if it's your own. Right? In other words, there's no mitzvah in the Torah to write Sifrei Torah to sell. There's no mitzvah to put cheles on your tzitzis. There's no mitzvah to catch the chilazon, to go in and process the dye to sell. That's called business. And obviously business in religious needs. But halacha l'maisa, we've just done something overwhelmingly dramatic, which has expanded the scope of osek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah, to include not only those, we'll say, look at the multiple levels. So now we have those who are actively engaged in the performance of a mitzvah. From Chassan we learned that what? If you're preoccupied with the thought of a future mitzvah. And now what we see is, if you are a facilitator for other people's spiritual growth, you are a facilitator for other people's mitzvahs, that's also P'tor, which is pretty incredible, and also an incredible Musar Haskell about how important it is in life not only to focus on your own growth, but to make sure to be a facilitator in the growth of others, which is an incredible and overwhelming. So, the Netziv writes by Avraham Avinu, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Avram that you're going to be a Av Hamon Goyim, a father of a multitude of nations. So the Netziv writes, really? Did that ever happen? Did Avraham Avinu become a father of a multitude of nations? The Pashtus, the answer is no. He didn't become a father of a multitude of nations. What are you talking about? He's right. So Netziv says, well, think about it this way. Avraham Avinu is the patriarchal figure in all of the major faiths. Right? In all of the major, not every faith, all the major faiths. So Avraham Avinu's influence, right? Avraham Avinu was a facilitator in general spirituality in the world. And sometimes, again, being the facilitator of other people's spiritual growth is in and of itself a dramatic thing. So therefore, again, if you're writing svarim, you're writing tefillin, you're making tcheles, you are facilitating growth. As well, say such an incredible yesod, because part of our own personal avoda is to encourage and to inspire growth in other people. If all I do is build me, there's something lacking in my ruchnius. But if I build me and I simultaneously go ahead and help others in whatever way that I can also build themselves, that's shleimus. That's called, you see from Chazal, that's called facilitating growth in others, is called osek b'mitzvah. We'll say next case. Those who go ahead and are traveling to do a mitzvah by day. So in this case, again, if you look at Rashi, look at Rashi. Listen to this. If you are traveling by day, you're pater from Sukkah. You're pater from Sukkah. They're both saying, now, what's the chiddush in this statement? See, a person might have thought like this. A person might have thought, look, it's the Yom Tov of Sukkot. I have an obligation to go ahead and be in a Sukkah. If I travel, whatever the traveling is, I'm going to miss out on staying in the Sukkah. Right? Or I may even have to eat outside of the Sukkah because I'm not going to have an available Sukkah. To which the Gemara says, you can go. You can go. You could travel by day, even if you're going to be without the Sukkah, you're pater from Sukkah. Now, why is it, Rabbi? Because Rashi says the Sukkah experience mirrors the home experience. Does a person sit at home all day? I mean, the truth is, before the pandemic, right? Did people sit at home all day? No, you got up, you went to work, you have to go about your day. So it's normal to go ahead and leave the house. So because it's normal to leave the house, even though you're not going to have access to your home, it's normal to go ahead and leave the Sukkah as well. And you can leave the Sukkah, you'll be parted from the Sukkah by day. Those who are traveling by night, who will be parted from the Sukkah at night, but chayiv by day. The Gemara says, "Bein bayom, bein balayla." If you're traveling by day and by night, good. If a person is traveling for a dvar mitzvah. So now again, we'll say a person is on a mitzvah mission, whatever that might be. P'turin bayom, p'turin bein bayom, bein balayla. We'll say now here's what's interesting. If you're traveling for your own purposes, right? Your own purposes. You're pater from Sukkah when? During the period of travel. Which makes sense, because the Sukkah is like my home. Just like I leave my home for certain needs, I'm permitted to leave my Sukkah for certain needs as well. The difference is that when you're traveling for Dvar Mitzvah, you're pater the entire time. Right? You're pater the entire time. Bein bayom, bein balayla. Kiyad Rav Chisda, v'ra barav huna, kiyavo aili b'shabsa deregla lebereish kalusa. Like for example, Rav Chisda and barav huna, when they would go for Shabbos of Yom, this is Shabbos Cholamayid, Shabbos of Sukkot, to the house of the Reish Kalusa, havugani araksa de Surah. They would sleep on the river bank by Surah, not in a Sukkah. Amri anan shluchei mitzvah ananu p'turin, because they would say, we are shluchei mitzvah, we are on a mitzvah mission, and therefore we are pater from Sukkah. What was the mitzvah mission they were on? They were going to visit their Rebbe, the Reish Kalusa, and therefore again they were exempt from Sukkah. Tan Rabbanan, shomri ha'ir bayom, p'turim min Sukkah. City watchmen by day are exempt from Sukkah. In other words, I should say daytime city watchmen. Right? They have a daytime shift. During the daytime shift, ultimately again they are pater from Sukkah. So v'chayavim balayla, but they're obligated at night. Which also makes sense. Remember, you can't be much of a watchman if what? If you have to remain in the Sukkah. So therefore, in order to do their job, they have to be out of the Sukkah. No problem. So to do your job, if your job precludes you from being in the Sukkah, you pater from Sukkah by day, but chayav by night. Especially if you're a watchman, you're providing for the security of the residents of the city. Shomri ha'ir balayla, if you have the night shift, right, at night, right, the night shift. P'tura min Sukkah balayla, you're exempt from Sukkah at night. V'chayavim bayom, and you're obligated by day. Shomri ha'ir bein yom bein balayla, if you're a watchman, and your shift is day and night, you're exempt from Sukkah by day and by night. So Rabbi say again, there's an individual who is providing ultimately a critical security service. So such a person is going to be exempt from Sukkah whenever their security services are required. Shomrei ganos upardesim. But say, what about someone who watches a field? So this individual is in charge of guarding the produce in a field. Piturin bein bayom ubein balayla. He is pater by day and by night. Why doesn't the watchman just make a sukkah in the field and just sit in the sukkah in the field? Abaye Amar Teishu Ke'in Taduru. Because Abaye said ultimately again that halacha l'maisa the sukkah has to go ahead and mirror your home. Meaning what? That the utensils that you would normally use in your home, you would use in your sukkah. No one schlepping those utensils, your bed or other things like that, into the field. So because you can't make a sukkah in the field that would resemble your actual domicile, you are exempt from doing so. Rava says there's a different reason. Pirza kora leganov, which literally means that it's an expression. A breach in the wall calls out to the thief. In other words, that when a thief sees a weakness or an area to exploit, he does so. I will say, which means like this: if the field watchman is sitting in a hut, the hut is closed on three sides, which then what? Which then prevents the watchman from having visibility on three sides. Any watchman who is blind on three sides is inviting the thief to cause havoc. To come into Aryeh Depiri. What's the Rabbi Nafkamina between these two approaches? If all you're guarding is one pile of fruits right in front of you. Say if it's an issue of a blind side for the Ganov, so okay, as long as the fruit is in front of you, you're good to go. If at the end of the day you're patur because Teshu Ke'in Taduru, because in the field you can't create a sukkah that resembles your home, then Allah Chalamaisa, even if it's only one pile of fruit, you would still be exempt from doing so. Shabbos say, what you begin to see over here is a little bit of a broadening of the exemption. Up until now, we've been speaking about an exemption from Sukkah because one is involved in a mitzvah. Now what we've begun to see is an exemption of Sukkah from Sukkah because of activities of daily living. That, remember again, pretty much anything that you would be normally doing on a regular day anyway, which would prevent you from being in your home. If it prevents you from being in your sukkah, you're patur. So if your job takes you away from sukkah, you're patur from sukkah. If ultimately, again, you're in that you see all the examples. So we're broadening now that not only is there an exemption from sukkah because of mitzvah, but there may be an exemption from sukkah because of activities of daily living as well. Pretty amazing. So the Gemara goes right to cholu misham shemein umisham shemein. Yeah. So furthermore, again, people who are ill and their attendants are also exempt from sukkah. The chol that we're talking about who's exempt from sukkah is not a chol sheish bo sakana, not someone who is dangerously ill, right? Or deathly ill. We'll say obviously such a person like that is exempt from sukkah. Ela afilu chol she'in bo sakana. Even if you have a chol who's not in mortal danger, afilu chash be'inav. Even if his eyes hurt him, afilu chash barosho, even if he just has a headache. So we'll say, what's the logic over here? The logic over here is that halacha l'maisa, sukkah resembles your home. We'll say, if you were sitting in your house and there was a room with a draft and you had a headache and the draft was bothering you, assuming, let's say, you couldn't get rid of the draft, what would you do? You'd find another room. So in other words, and again, I would do that even for the slightest amount of discomfort. So the sukkah kind of resembles the same idea. What the Gemara is saying is, if I'm not feeling well, it doesn't have to be something dramatic. I have a terrible headache, and it's bothering me to be in the sukkah. In other words, we'll say, remember, this presupposes that being in the sukkah bothers me more than if I were in the house. So under those circumstances, I could transplant myself back into my house. It doesn't have to be dramatic illness. One time, my eyes were bothering me. I was in Caesarea. Rabbi allowed me and my attendants to sleep inside the house. So even for a mere headache, even for a mere or an eye ache, ultimately, again, you're permitted to relocate. Rav Sharler Rav Acha Bardala, the Migna Bikilsa Besuka Mishum Bakir. We'll say this is a great case. Rav allowed Rav Acha Bardala to sleep under a canopy because of mosquitoes. Now this is a halacha l'maisa case, right? So again, because of mosquitoes, he allowed us to also say, by the way, this is actually a very shaykh case. Let's say there's a mosquito issue, and a person is very susceptible, or sometimes a person is allergic, right? So ultimately, again, that would be reason to be able to locate inside of the home. Now here I will say just the use of the canopy. Remember again, going back, we spent a lot of time on canopies, the sugi of canopies. So this could either mean that in this case the canopy has the status of a tent, yet he was still allowed to go ahead and go under a tent, even though being in a tent precludes you from being in the midst of sukkah, or perhaps this was the type of canopy that wasn't really an ohel. Whatever it is, the point the Gemara is making over here is that halacha l'maisa, even for an insect discomfort, one could potentially relocate from the sukkah. Rava Sharlei Rav Acha Bar Ada Lemigna Bar Metaltalasa Mishum Sircha de Gargishta. Rava allowed Rabbi Acha to go ahead and go sleep inside because apparently on the floor of his sukkah they had put down white sand. And apparently this white sand had some type of odor. In other words, he was bothered by an odor in the sukkah. Now, again, Mepharshim point out that it's possible this odor only bothered Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, it wasn't such a pungent odor, but Rabbi Yochanan was very sensitive to smell, and therefore, again, he was permitted to go inside of the sukkah because the smell was difficult for him. Inside of the home, sorry. Rava l'tamei damar Rava mitztaer pater min sukkah. And both say Rava allowed all of these individuals to relocate for one simple reason: mitztaer pater min sukkah. If you are in discomfort, you are pater from sukkah. I will say again, remember going back to yesterday's daf, a very important caveat to this, which is, where must your discomfort emanate from? Where must it emanate from? From the sukkah. Right? In other words, that if my discomfort is related to something other than sukkah, then Allah, but if my discomfort is either, well, I should qualify that also. If my discomfort is either from the sukkah itself, like the case we saw in the foul-smelling white sand, or my discomfort is exacerbated by sukkah. I have a headache and it hurts more to be outdoors. The mosquitoes, right? So again, then you're pater from sukkah. An incredible yisod. But the Mishnah just said that someone who is ill is pater from sukkah. So from the Mishnah, the Mashmos says, achola, someone who's ill is pater, but a mitztayer, someone who's in discomfort. How do you know that such a person is pater? To which the Gemara says, Amri, chole hu mishamshav p'turin, mitztaer hu pater or mishamshav lo. This is very interesting. Here's the distinction. By a chole, by someone who is ill, not only is the chole himself ill, but anyone who attends to him is pater as well. Right? So by a chole, the chole is pater, and his care team, right, whoever is part of his care team, is pater as well. By mitztaer, right? So we'll say mitztaer is just someone who's uncomfortable. By mitztaer, so the mitztaer himself, or it doesn't apply to women because woman is pater anyway. By mitztaer, the mitztaer is pater, but what? There's no care team. Right? There's no like, I have so much empathy that I feel, Reuven has such a bad headache. I feel his headache as if it was my own. Let's go inside together. That doesn't work, right? So again, by chola, it's even the care team. By mitztaer, it's only the mitztaer himself. Both say we're going to get some really, really fascinating sugyas. So we go ahead and you can eat achilas aray. Now, both say aray normally means temporary. Right, so what does it mean? You could eat achilas aray outside of the sukkah. The kama achilas aray. How much is aray? Rav Yosef tartio tlas bei. It's the amount of 2 or 3 eggs. Sometimes people eat that amount for a meal. Right, the volume of 2 or 3 eggs. How are you calling that achilas aray? Elam Abaye kidetoim bar beirav va'ayil lekala. Rather, Abaye says that what? It's the amount, ultimately, again, that a Talmud Chacham eats before, someone in yeshiva eats before he goes off to the Beis Medrash. Now, both say, what does this mean? If you look at Rashi says, Kidetoim bar beirav va'ayil lekala, baboker kishochon leBeis Medrash v'doig shema yimshichu am shmos v'toim ale pi v'shosa. Sometimes before a guy goes off to yeshiva, what happens? He's nervous that the shir is going to go on too long. It's an age-old problem, right? The shir is going to go on too long. He's going to get hungry. So what does he do? He eats just a little something just before he goes, right? This way, again, his stomach is not growling if shir goes on. That's called achilas aray. Now it's interesting because Rashi explains, or Rashi does not, v'toim male piv. It's enough food. So essentially, it's a mouthful of food. It's a mouthful of food, right? So a mouthful of food is called achilas aray. Amar Abba, so the Gemara says, Tanabanon, ochlin achilas aray chutz l'sukkah. You could go ahead and eat an achilas aray outside of the sukkah. Ve'en yeshenim shinas aray chutz l'sukkah. But you cannot sleep is shinas aray outside of the sukkah. So both say, so let's just use vernacular terms. So for example, you can eat a snack outside of the sukkah. Now we're going to have to define this because this is a big sugya in Hilchos Sukkah. So you can eat a snack outside of the sukkah, but you can't take a nap outside of the sukkah. Right? So again, remember, normally you have to eat and you have to sleep inside of the sukkah. So the exception is you can eat a little bit, and achilas aray, we'll define what that is. But you can't take a little sleep, right? You can't take a nap outside of the sukkah. My time, very simply because we're concerned that if we allow you to nap, we'll say many naps begin as a nap and then turn into something much more significant. So we're concerned that if we allow you to take a little nap outside of the sukkah, it's going to turn into a full-blown sleep Amrle Abaye, Elahadisanya Yashin Adam Shinas Rai B'Tfilin, Avalo Shinas Keva. But we learned that a person is allowed to take a nap in his tefillin, but he's not allowed to sleep a regular sleep in his tefillin. Leicho Shema Yiradim. How are you allowed to nap? How are you allowed to doze in your tefillin? After all, maybe you'll fall fully asleep. Because what's the case? When are you allowed to nap in your tefillin? When you have someone else who's there who's going to wake you up. So you tell your friend, listen, I'm going to take it up. But it also presupposes people are wearing tefillin the entire day, right? So you want to tell your friend, I'm going to close my eyes for a few minutes, nap for a few minutes. Do me a favor, if you see me slipping into a deeper sleep, right, go ahead and wake me up. Maskiv or misharshia, arveich, arvat sarich. I have 1 second. What's to say your friend's not going to fall asleep? Literally, the guarantor of your guarantor, right? Your guarantor needs a guarantor. Maybe your friend's going to fall asleep also. This is what says. How are you taking a nap? Essentially in the crash position, right? You put your head between your knees, which is a very uncomfortable position. So therefore, again, you're not going to really fall asleep like that. Okay, and that's how you can nap with tefillin, because we're pretty sure in that circumstance you're not going to fall asleep. Rava Amar, Ein Keva Lashina. Rava said sleep is sleep is sleep, and really you can't sleep at all. You can't sleep at all outside of the sukkah. Rashi says over here, Rava Amar, L'shema Yiradim Lo Chayshin, and Hilcha Petfillin Shari. So Rava says, really, you're just not allowed to sleep at all outside of the sukkah. Tani Chada, Yashin Adam B'Tfilin Shinas Aray V'Lo Shinas Keva. So we're going to point out we have three conflicting statements. One brisa says, or one Mishnah says, Yashin Adam B'Tfilin Shinas Aray V'Lo Shinas Keva. That when wearing your tefillin, you can take a nap, but you can't take you can't get engaged in full-blown sleep. V'tanya Yidach, another brisa says, Ben Keva Ben Aray, you can go ahead and sleep either Keva or Aray. V'tanya Yidach, Lo Keva V'Lo Aray. And the third brisa says, you can't sleep Keva or Aray. So we'll say three different brises. Brisa number one, you could sleep Aray but not Keva. Brisa number two, you can sleep Keva or Aray. Brisa number three, you can't sleep Keva or Aray. Lokash, the Gemara says, not a contradiction, last two lines. Hadina Kedlu Biyadei. One brisa is talking about where you're holding your tefillin. We'll say if you're holding your tefillin in your hand, not wearing it, holding it in your hand, you can't sleep Aray or Keva. Why not? What are we concerned about? Dropping it. Ha de manchir bereishe. One is talking about where you're wearing your tefillin. If you're wearing your tefillin, you could sleep shinas, right? You could take a nap. But ultimately, again, you're not permitted to you're not allowed to fall into a full-blown sleep. Now Rashi says over here, what's the reason for this? Shema yafiach. It's actually a concern of flatulence. It's a concern that when a person is asleep, they don't have the same level of control over their bodily functions, and ultimately, again, a person may do things that are disparaging to the sanctity of the tefillin. And lastly, hadiparas sudra iluya. The last case is where ultimately, again, you're not wearing your tefillin, you place the sheet over the tefillin. In that case, halacha lamaisa, you can sleep however you want. Shinas aray, shinas keva, not a problem. Just by the way, the Gemara says, v'kama shinas aray, how much is a nap? Right? Well, what is a shinas aray? That's the definition. Tani Rami Bar Yecheskel, kadei hiluch mea ama. It's the amount of time it takes to walk 100 amas. A rice that supports this. Hayashin betfillin varoa carry. If a person is wearing tefillin and has a seminal emission, so again, I will say a person has to remove the tefillin. So the Gemara says, Rashi says over here, varoa carry. Sarch lesalkan meirosha ba'od karyav. He has to remove the tefillin immediately. So what does he do? Oches beritzua amadeis ve'ino oches beketzitza divi Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov says in that case, a person should not touch the bias directly. Instead, what a person does is he takes the ritzua, the strap, and removes the bias with the strap. So therefore, there's no direct contact with the tefillin itself. But you have to understand something. A lot of these halachas are much more shayach when you're wearing tefillin the entire day, right? So remember again, for us sometimes we hear these things, we're wearing tefillin for a couple of minutes in the morning. But when you're wearing it the whole day, these cases become a bit more shayach. So the Chacham say, Yashin Ada B'Tefillin Shinas Aray, Avalo Shinas Keva. The Chachamim say a person could even take a nap in his tefillin, but not the Shinas Keva. Not the real sleep. The Kama Shinas Aray, and how much is a nap? Kedei hiluch mea ama. Once again, you have that shear, the amount of time it takes to walk, 100 amas. Amar Rav says, Asr la'adam lishna yom yoser mishinas hasus. Interesting, was another halacha. During the day, a person is not permitted to sleep more than a horse sleeps. How much does a horse sleep? V'kama shinas hasus? Shisin nishmi. 60 breaths. 60 breaths. Now, we'll say, take a look at Rashi just a moment. Before we get into the shear, why is there a cap on how long you could sleep during the day? So Rashi says, Bayom mipnei bittul Torah. Bittul Torah. Both say, this is such an incredible yisod. And I'll just mention it here. It's so incredibly important. I'll say, especially, you know this, especially again, during the week, this is not so shayach. But on Shabbos, so sometimes you hear people say, oh, such a great Shabbos. I slept for 4.5 hours. I'll say 4.5 hours is a night's sleep. That's not a nap, right? That's a night's sleep. I'll say it's such an incredible yisod, especially on Shabbos Kodesh, which is the one day that we have that is away from everything else, right? Away from the world. Of course, Shina b'Shabbos Tainuk. Sleeping on Shabbos is part of the mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos and important. But it's so important that the nap does not become the dominant feature of the day. And a person, Rashi says over here, Chazal said, you could take a nap, but there's a cap on how much you should sleep by day. Because at a certain point in time, this is incredible, at a certain point in time, even a nap becomes bittul Torah. It's a pretty incredible yisod about the achrayus the Jew has to accomplish things in life. At a certain point in time, even a nap becomes bittul Torah. So I will say, this shear of shisin nishmin, of 60 breaths, is actually really quite interesting. Quite interesting. So there's we're gonna do the Ber Halacha tomorrow because I don't have time to get into it today. But the Ber Halacha has a whole discussion about this, about what this shear is. First of all, again, I'm assuming that no one here is an expert in horse respiration, right? But Lamaisa, like what is that? It can't just mean 60 breaths, like we would take 60 breaths, because you could take 60 breaths in, I don't know, 2 minutes, right? Less than 2 minutes, right? So again, we'll see exactly what the shear is. The takeaway for now is that there's a cap on daytime sleeping, because then it becomes bittul Torah. Omer Abaye, Shansei Demar Kidirav. So Abaye said, my Rebbe, Rav Bar Nachmani, he only slept like Rav. Udirav Kidirabi, Rav only slept during the day as much as Rebbe. Udirabi Kidavid, and Rebbe only slept during the day as much as David HaMelech. How much David Kidesusye. David HaMelech never slept more than a horse. Now, I will say, the truth is, the Gemara Masechtas Brachos says, David HaMelech never slept at night more than the horse. Right? David HaMelech was very makbid to minimize his sleep at night. So I just want to point out, we just transitioned here for a moment, because the Gemara was talking about the cap on the amount of sleep by day. Now the Gemara just points out, David HaMelech did not sleep more than shisin nishmin, 60 horse respirations at night. Udesusye shisin nishmin, and a horse doesn't sleep more than 60 breaths. Abaye Habakanaim, Abaye would only sleep for the amount of time that it would take to walk from Pumpadisa to Beikubi, which seems to be a kind of a significant journey. So Amakari Ali Rav Yosef used to say about him, Ad Masay Atzal Tishkav Masay Taka Mishnasecha. So I will say, Rav Yosef would kind of give Musar would give Musar to Abaye, according to the pasuk from Mishlei, Ad Masay Atzal Tishkav. How long will the lazy person sleep? When will you get up from your sleep? So Rav Yosef is giving him Musar. No one needs to sleep that long, right? Why do you spend so much time sleeping? Tell Rabbanon, Hanichnas Lishan Bayom Ratza Cholitz Ratza Maniach. Suppose say if a person goes to sleep by day, if he wants to go ahead and take his tefillin off or leave them on, he has the right to do so. Now Rashi says over here, Hanichnas Lishon Shein Kavanos Ala Lishon Ve'ino Maharher L'Davar Acher. So we'll say, now this is very interesting, because up until now we were assuming that if a person has intention to even engage in a longer period of sleep, even by day, halacha l'maaseh, you can't do that with tefillin on, right? Only thing you can do with tefillin on is maybe is doze, is nap. This price seems to indicate that a person could even potentially go ahead and fully go to sleep by day. But at night, halacha l'maisa, you can't wear tefillin if you decide to go to sleep. In other words, even if your intention, Rashi points out over here, even if your intention at night is only to doze, only to take a nap, you cannot doze at night wearing your tefillin. And the logic of this price is what? Because at night, it's much easier for what? For a nap to turn into a full night's sleep. By day, we're not as concerned. By day, people don't usually engage in a full night's sleep by day. So if your intention is just to take a nap, we trust that that's going to remain your intention. So Rabbi Yossi Omer, you know what say, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Emirat Hashem with Rabbi Yossi. I'm sorry we didn't, it was a long daf on the front end, but Emirat Hashem will make up some time tomorrow. We'll finish a sugi of tefillin Emirat Hashem tomorrow.